Alright, hello guys. Today we are going to be focusing on essay writing, and by the end of today's lesson, hopefully you'll be able to craft your own essay paragraph. Hopefully you not look as stressed as SpongeBob does in this GIF. So far up to now, right, we've done a lot of interesting activities, but most of them are supposed to make you interested in literature. But right now we are going to get on to assessment, and we are going to get on to essay writing. As I said before in class, right, essay writing is the only real way in which you are assessed for literature. So unfortunately, you will have to master this skill. Okay, so I don't want you to feel scared. You don't have to have very good English to produce a very good essay, but there are some basics that you have to follow. And as long as you follow them, right, I think you'll be perfectly fine. Okay, right. So first, right, I'm gonna recap. Some of the things that we have done so far. Right, I'm gonna recap to you some of the techniques that we have learned that writers use when they are writing a story, and it's important for you to identify these techniques that the writers use because you are expected to identify them in your essays as well. Okay, so far we've done indirect characterization. We have also learned how to talk about a character's intentions, like why does a character do something, and we also learned about sarcasm, when characters use sarcasm and what it means. Okay, this next picture should look very familiar to you. This is a graph of the ways in which writers talk about character, and there are basically two kinds. Firstly, it's through direct characterization over here, and then there's indirect characterization over here. Okay, for now, right, we can ignore direct characterization because it's not very significant at this point yet. When we come to a story that uses a lot of direct characterization, maybe we'll talk about it more. There's a story like that in the Roald Dahl anthology. It's called The Sound Machine. So when we reach the Sound Machine, maybe we'll talk more about direct characterization. Okay, yeah. So for the time being, we are actually focusing on indirect characterization. Okay, and so far, actually, there's a very interesting portion in the story which shows us what indirect characterization is as opposed to direct characterization. So at the beginning of the story of the butler, okay, the writer tells us that the dinners that took place at George Cleaver's house never seemed to come off, that there was no animation, no spark to set the conversation alight, no style at all, and yet the food was superb and the service faultless. So from this, right, that something's quite wrong with the parties that George gives. And it can be implied, of course, that the fault is George's, right? The food is superb, the service is faultless. Who else is at fault, right? Okay. So I think what the line is trying to say is that George is very boring, and this is from the narration, right? The writer tells us that George is boring directly through the parts of the story where the writer is directly speaking to us. In contrast, indirect characterization occurs when the writer shows us what the character does, and the writer would do this through the way a character behaves in a story. So, for example, this is when Mr. Cleaver learns how to appreciate wine, and then he comes into the dinner party, and the way he talks tells us that while he seems to be very educated about wine, he still seems very boring, right? And look at the guests, the way they react, they nod and sip and mumble a few praises, but that was all, right? So his learning about wine has had no effect on how interesting he is to his guests. So in direct characterization, right, the writer tells us this directly, but in indirect characterization, the writer does this through his characters, like a puppet master, right? The writer makes his characters move and talk, and it's through that we understand the character. So that's indirect characterization. Okay, and we've learned about indirect characterization. We've talked about the kinds of techniques that the writers use. Sometimes the writers use the setting of the story to tell us about character, or they may talk about character's appearance, or they may talk about maybe the words that a character says tells us about what he's like. His thoughts can also be a strong indication, especially when the writer shows us his thoughts. The character's actions and behavior will tell us more about a character, and the relationships this character has with other characters will also tell us more about him. Okay. We also learn about sarcasm, when a character says one thing but he means the other. And when you talk about sarcasm, when a character is sarcastic, right, like when he says ha ha ha, that's so funny, but it's not funny at all, right? we must tell us, we must be able to explain what the character appears to say on the surface level, and then we must explain what the character is really implying. And lastly, after you say that, right, you must tell us why the character uses sarcasm. Like, what is his intention behind doing so? What does it show us about his qualities, right? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he a mean guy? Is he an angry guy? Is he arrogant? Does he think he's better than everybody else, right? Or does he just look down on everybody else? What is his intention, right? Yeah. We also talked about intentions, and I'm pretty sure you remember these pictures. We saw them in class, right? We say that a character is motivated by feelings, like a character will do something because he feels a certain way, or perhaps he has certain beliefs, right? He thinks he has certain assumptions that he makes about the way things work in the world, or sometimes a character does things because of the relationships that he has with other people. Is he doing this because he loves somebody, or he's doing this because he hates something or someone, right? Yeah. So a character's feelings, beliefs, and relationships will tell us very much about their intentions. Okay. So next, this will be a time where you need to do an activity. So what's going to happen is you're going to do an MCQ questions. So I'm going to give you guys a lot of evidence, a lot of things that happen inside a story. I'm going to give you short extracts of each story, and I want you to break down this evidence for me, right? What kind of evidence is it? Is it evidence of setting? Is it evidence of a character's appearance? Is it evidence of a character's words, thoughts, actions and behavior, or relationships? There's a fine distinction. So when you complete this, maybe you'll understand the techniques a lot better, and maybe you will be able to apply these in your essays when you tell me what kind of evidence the writer is giving. Alright, so good luck.